A teacher laughed as he called a black janitor's son to the board for fun. The class expected failure, but when the boy solved a calculus problem, even the top students couldn't touch. The room froze. By the next day the video went viral, and the threats began. What he uncovered next would shake the entire school system. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday in room 312, the coldest classroom in Northdale High. The fluorescent lights above flickered faintly, buzzing over rows of indifferent faces half buried in phones and hoodies. At the front, Mr. Callahan stood with his usual posture, slouched just enough to look bored, smug enough to remind everyone he thought he was the smartest man in the room. He adjusted his tie, more out of habit than necessity, then scanned the room with that same dry smile that often preceded one of his light-hearted moments. He always seemed to enjoy picking favorites, and more often than not, the students he liked least all had one thing in common, and it wasn't GPA. "Alright, since some of you thought yesterday's quiz was hard," he drawled, turning toward the whiteboard, "maybe we should let someone else take a crack at today's warm-up." He uncapped a marker and started scribbling an equation, long layered, filled with derivatives, limits, and integrals that no one in the room had ever seen. He turned around slowly. "Mr. Reed," he said, pausing just long enough for the silence to turn sharp. "How about you give it a shot?" Heads turned in unison. Jamal Reed, seated in the last row near the recycling bin, looked up without saying a word. At 16, he was already taller than most of his classmates, but carried himself like he was trying not to be noticed. His hoodie sleeves were too short, exposing his wrists. His shoes were worn at the soles, laces frayed. Most people only knew him as the janitor's son, a title that stuck more than his own name. Jamal didn't answer. He just blinked, slowly, unsure if Mr. Callahan was serious. The silence stretched. "Come on up, Reed," Callahan said, the sarcasm dripping now. "Let's see what you've been learning back there in your little sketchbook." A few students laughed. A couple exchanged looks. One whispered, "Why's he even in AP?" Jamal stood, clutching a battered composition notebook to his chest. He walked to the front, his steps quiet but steady. Mr. Callahan handed him the marker with a smirk. "Here's your shot at greatness," he said. "Or at least, competent." Jamal stared at the equation. It was a multivariable calculus problem, something clearly out of scope for a high school course. The class waited, expecting hesitation, maybe a stammer, or a refusal. What they got was silence and movement. Jamal uncapped the marker and started writing. First, a partial derivative. Then, a substitution. His handwriting was small, precise, fast. The laughter stopped after the second line. By the fourth, no one was breathing. Mr. Callahan's smile slowly faded. He crossed his arms, watching as the boy he tried to humiliate turned the joke into a masterclass. There was no confusion in Jamal's eyes, no glances for help, no pauses, just methodical, intentional steps, each one correct. Students sat straighter in their chairs. One of them started filming. In the span of 3 minutes, Jamal rewrote the rules of the classroom. He solved for variables, restructured the limits, and cleaned up the final expression with the kind of elegance that came from not just understanding math, but speaking its language. When he reached the final line, he paused, rechecked his work once, then underlined the answer. No fanfare, no smile. He simply put the marker down on the ledge and turned back toward the room. And that's when the silence hit. Not stunned silence, not polite surprise. It was the sound of 100 unspoken assumptions cracking all at once. Students stared, blinking. Mr. Callahan opened his mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. Jamal didn't look at anyone. He walked back to his seat, picked up his notebook, and sat down. That was all. But the damage was already done. And then, something no one expected happened. From the middle of the room, a student whispered just loud enough, "Yo, that was correct. I checked it. That was actually right." Another student nodded, then another. A voice from the back muttered, "How'd he even know how to do that?" Still, Mr. Callahan stood frozen. Then he turned quickly, erased the board with trembling hands, and muttered something about "good guess," and moving on. But it was too late. The power dynamic had shifted, and everyone felt it. As the class continued with a new problem, far easier, more familiar, eyes kept darting back to Jamal. He didn't look up. He just returned to his notebook, flipping to a page filled with symbols and notations no one could decipher. For the rest of the period, Mr. Callahan never once called on him again. But something had started. Something irreversible. And when the bell rang, someone posted the video clip online with the caption, "The janitor's son just cooked our math teacher." By the time Jamal left the room, the video had already started to spread. What none of them knew was that by third period, the video would have 10,000 views, and a storm was about to begin. By lunchtime, the video had already crossed 20,000 views. Shot from the middle row of AP Math, it captured every second, Mr. Callahan's smug tone, Jamal's slow walk to the board, and the collective silence as he solved what no one else could. No music, no edits, just raw disbelief turning into awe. It was the kind of clip that spread fast because it struck a nerve, not just for what it showed, but because of who it showed. They called him the janitor's son, and not kindly. It was a label that stuck to Jamal like static, whispered in locker rooms and hallways, as if it was something he should be ashamed of. But no one had ever asked what that actually meant. No one had ever wondered what it was like to sit in classes where your father cleaned the floors, or how it felt to wear second-hand clothes in a school where wealth was worn like cologne. Jamal Reed had always kept his head down, not out of fear, but out of something quieter, protection. He moved through the world like a shadow, carefully avoiding attention, staying late after school, not because he had nowhere to go, but because he had too much to do. At 4:15, when the last bell rang, and the halls began to empty, Jamal didn't head for the bus. Instead, he walked to the back of the school, where his father, Marcus Reed, would be wheeling out his cart of cleaning supplies. Marcus was a quiet man, built like someone who carried burdens for a living. He wore the same uniform every day: gray shirt, navy pants, a ring of keys clipped to his belt that jangled softly when he walked. "Locker room's got a busted sink," he said, handing Jamal a pair of gloves. "We'll hit that first." Jamal nodded. This was their unspoken rhythm. While other kids played sports or hung out, Jamal helped his father clean. They moved room by room, wiping chalk dust from desks, scrubbing away the grain left behind by a day's worth of teenagers, dumping trash bags heavier than they looked. It was physical work, repetitive, but for Jamal it was also quiet time. A space where no one questioned his presence, where no one laughed when he opened a textbook far too advanced for his age. His mother, Ava Reed, had once dreamed of becoming an engineer. She had made it halfway there before life turned sideways. Pregnant too young, passed over for promotion, and eventually diagnosed with lupus. She died when Jamal was just 7, but before she left, she gave him her prized possession, a thick, worn notebook, filled with handwritten problems, formulas, and the kind of questions that had no simple answers. Most kids got bedtime stories. Jamal got limits and differentials. It didn't make sense to anyone else. But for him, numbers were safe. Numbers didn't lie. They didn't roll their eyes or chuckle when he got excited about concepts like vectors or integrals. Numbers just existed, quiet and perfect and fair. So while other kids scrolled TikTok, Jamal downloaded lectures from MIT OpenCourseWare. He borrowed college textbooks from the public library and memorized theorems by flashlight. He didn't need a classroom to learn. He just needed time, and late nights in empty classrooms gave him exactly that. But everything changed after the incident with Mr. Callahan. By 7th period, the whispers had begun. Not questions, accusations. He cheated. No way, he just knew that. His dad probably stole a test. A group of seniors in the lunchroom replayed the video and laughed. Not at Mr. Callahan, but at the idea that Jamal, quiet, poor, unseen Jamal, could be anything more than a fluke. Even the teachers seemed confused, exchanging glances in the hallway as if trying to figure out what they'd missed. But Jamal didn't explain himself. He didn't walk taller, didn't smile bigger. He just kept his head down, like always. Only now, there was a tension in the air, an invisible cord tightening with every new view, every new comment online. That night, Jamal sat at the kitchen table, scribbling in his notebook while the small TV played in the background. Marcus came in, wiping sweat from his brow. "You were quiet today," Marcus said, setting down a sack of groceries. "Nothing new," Jamal replied without looking up. Marcus hesitated, then sat across from him. "Saw your name on my phone. Some video. Something happened at school?" Jamal's pen stopped. "Callahan tried to clown me. Gave me a problem he thought I couldn't solve. And I solved it." Marcus didn't say anything right away. He just nodded slowly, pride flickering in his eyes, then dimming just as fast. "You sure that was smart?" he asked, his voice low. Jamal looked up, confused. What do you mean? Smart doesn't always help us, son. Especially not when they don't expect it. Jamal stared at him. So what, I'm supposed to act dumb so people feel comfortable? No, Marcus said quietly. But don't expect smart to protect you either. They both fell silent, the weight of those words sinking into the floorboards. Outside, the night thickened. Inside, Jamal closed his notebook. He knew his father wasn't trying to discourage him. He was trying to prepare him. But how do you prepare for being seen, for the first time, and hated for it? By midnight, the video had crossed 50,000 views. It had spread from their town to a viral subreddit titled Unlikely Genius. Thousands of comments poured in. Some were in awe. This kid is brilliant. Someone get him a scholarship. That's natural talent. But others were cruel. Affirmative action in action. No way a janitor's son figured that out legit. Must have been staged. These people always playing the race card. Jamal scrolled through them all, eyes scanning faster and faster, his heart pounding in his chest. Each insult felt sharper than the last, not because they were lies, but because they were exactly what he expected. And then, one comment stood out. An anonymous user had posted, "Saw him in the library last year reading college math books. Kid's been grinding in silence. You all just mad he's smarter than you." Jamal blinked. He didn't know who wrote it. Maybe no one he'd ever met. But it was enough. Because it meant someone had seen him, even when he thought no one did. But by morning the tone would shift completely. Because someone had tagged his school in the video, and now the administration was watching. By the next morning the air inside Northdale High felt thicker, like something unspoken had shifted overnight. Teachers glanced nervously at their phones between classes. Students whispered in stairwells, pulling up the now viral clip under desks, watching Jamal's quiet brilliance unfold over and over. But this time, the reaction wasn't just awe, it was division. By lunch the video had surpassed 100,000 views, and while many praised Jamal's intellect, another wave of response, darker, uglier, began to swell beneath the surface. Screens lit up with words like cheat, setup, and publicity stunt. The term affirmative action Einstein started trending locally, accompanied by memes that distorted Jamal's face next to images of calculators and janitor carts. Someone even edited the video to add clown music over Mr. Callahan's face, then reversed the punchline, implying the real joke was on the school for believing the solution was real. At the center of it all, Jamal walked the halls like he was being watched through a glass cage, students staring just a second too long, teachers going silent when he entered, friends avoiding eye contact as if proximity might attract attention. Mr. Callahan, meanwhile, had already begun his damage control. At the faculty lounge, he leaned against the vending machine and spoke in a tone of casual deflection. "It was just a spontaneous moment," he said to a fellow teacher. "I saw potential in Jamal and wanted to give him a chance to shine. I didn't think he'd actually know it, but hey, good for him, right?" He laughed a little too loud. Kids surprise us sometimes. Maybe he got lucky, or maybe he saw the problem somewhere else. The other teacher didn't respond. She just nodded, unsure whether to question him or stay silent. By third period, Jamal was called to the main office. He walked in, eyes steady, but his stomach twisted as he saw the principal, Mr. Whitmore, seated beside Assistant Principal Green. They both offered tight, unreadable smiles. "Jamal, please sit," Whitmore said, gesturing toward the small plastic chair across from them. He sat, clutching his notebook tightly. "We've been receiving a lot of attention online regarding your performance in Mr. Callahan's class yesterday," Green began, her tone syrupy but sharp underneath. "It's certainly gone viral." Jamal nodded slowly, unsure how to respond. Whitmore leaned forward. "We're not here to accuse you of anything, son, but well, given the nature of the problem you solved, and the fact that it wasn't part of the official curriculum, we have a few questions." Jamal's voice was calm. "What kind of questions?" "For starters," Green said, flipping through a folder, "how did you learn calculus? Were you being tutored? Did you have access to any test materials beforehand?" Jamal blinked. "No. I studied it on my own. At home. In the library. Online." Green raised an eyebrow. "On your own?" "Yeah. Since I was 12. Whitmore offered a strained smile. "That's impressive, Jamal. Truly. But can you understand why some people might find that unusual? Unusual, or unacceptable?" Jamal asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Neither administrator responded immediately. "We just want to make sure everything was done fairly." Whitmore said. No outside help, no access to faculty computers. Nothing like that. Jamal stared at them both. Are you asking if I broke in to steal a math problem that wasn't even on a test? Again. Silence. Green shifted in her seat. There's been some chatter among parents. Concerns. We're trying to stay ahead of it. Jamal didn't say a word. He could feel it. The quiet reshaping of the story. In the video, he was a genius. In this room, he was a threat. The meeting ended with vague reassurances. We'll be in touch, Whitmore said. And please, Jamal, stay focused on your regular studies for now. We don't want any distractions. As he walked out, the receptionist wouldn't meet his eyes. Word spread faster than fire. By the time he returned to class, someone had scrawled a message on his locker. Try cheating on this genius.
Jamal wiped it off without a word.
That night, Marcus found him on the couch, his laptop open, the screen filled with equations and lecture notes. You okay? Marcus asked, lowering himself into the recliner. They think I cheated, Jamal said softly. Marcus exhaled hard. Of course they do. Jamal looked up. Why? Because they'd rather believe a black kid lied than admit he's smarter than the teacher. For a long time, they sat in silence. Then Marcus added, Doesn't mean you stop. Just means you've got to move smarter now. Jamal nodded, even though his chest burned. But the real twist came the next morning. The front desk phone at Northdale rang just after 8:30. A parent had called, not to praise Jamal's brilliance, but to file an official complaint. The allegation? Academic fraud. The anonymous caller claimed Jamal must have accessed sensitive staff materials or received unauthorized tutoring that gave him an unfair advantage. The administration was forced to log the complaint, and by school policy, initiate a preliminary inquiry. By third period, whispers returned, but this time, darker. Now it wasn't just, did you see the video? It was, did you hear they're investigating him? Jamal found himself walking slower, shoulders hunched, not from shame, but from exhaustion. He hadn't asked for this spotlight. He had only solved a problem. But somehow that had become the problem. And just as he reached his locker, a small envelope had been taped to it, unmarked. Inside, a note in careful handwriting read, I know what you did, you're not special, and you won't get away with it. The note in the envelope haunted Jamal for the rest of the day. Its message was short, no name, no threat of violence, just a warning wrapped in jealousy and venom. I know what you did, you're not special, and you won't get away with it. The handwriting was clean, almost too neat. Jamal folded it twice and shoved it into his back pocket, but the words pressed against his skin like heat. He didn't tell anyone, not yet. The investigation that followed moved with the cold efficiency of a system protecting itself. Jamal was summoned again to the principal's office, this time not for questions, but for a temporary academic leave while the inquiry into the complaint was processed. It wasn't called a suspension, and there was no paperwork to prove it, but his name quietly disappeared from attendance rosters. The official story? He's focusing on his mental health. The truth? He was being erased before he could become a problem the district couldn't control. Marcus Reed, still in his gray janitor's uniform and steel-toe boots, marched straight to the front office when he found out. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just asked to speak to the principal, his calloused hands resting on the counter like anchors. I'm here about my son, he said. I need answers. Reception told him to wait. He waited 45 minutes before being told Mr. Whitmore was unavailable, that someone would get back to him. They never did. The next morning, Marcus left his mop cart beside the faculty lounge and knocked on the door to Mr. Whitmore's office. This time, the principal answered, but only after looking past Marcus as if expecting someone else. We've got this under control, Whitmore said, arms crossed. This doesn't involve custodial staff. Marcus's face didn't flinch. It involves my boy. Whitmore sighed. This isn't personal. We're just following district protocol. No, sir, Marcus said, voice even. You're following fear, but don't pretend it's policy. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. Mr. Reed, if you have an issue, I suggest you contact the district through the proper channels. The proper channels don't work for people like me, Marcus replied. That's why I'm standing here. But still, nothing changed. Jamal spent the next 4 days at home, pacing between his bed and the living room, watching as the internet turned him into a symbol without ever asking what he wanted. Some praised him as a genius, others mocked him as a fraud, and through it all, Mr. Callahan never once apologized. In fact, He continued teaching the same class, same room, same whiteboard, like nothing had happened. He even used Jamal's name as a punchline. He pulled a Jamal today, one student joked to another during class. Acted like he knew the answer, but didn't even understand the question. And Mr. Callahan chuckled, barely hiding it. But Jamal knew exactly how he'd gotten here. Years before anyone ever doubted him, before classrooms filled with whispers and accusations, Jamal had learned to live in silence. Every evening, after helping his father clean the school, he would stay behind, not because he had to, but because he couldn't let go of what the walls were hiding. Room 209 was his sanctuary. It was a forgotten classroom in the science wing, door always unlocked, shelves filled with dusty books, no one borrowed anymore. He would sit at the back desk, crack open his mother's old engineering notes, and match them against college-level textbooks from the public library. He taught himself derivatives before he ever knew what the word meant, watching YouTube lectures until his eyes blurred. Some nights his father would find him asleep at the desk, textbook open beneath his head. Marcus never scolded him, just covered him with his own jacket, turned off the lights, and wheeled his cart away quietly. This was where Jamal built his foundation, layer by layer, proof by proof. He never expected anyone to notice. He just wanted to know enough to escape the limits people put on boys like him. Now those same people were trying to crush him with the weight of their disbelief. One evening, while scrolling through Reddit threads that had been circulating the video, Jamal noticed something new. Comments from unfamiliar names, defending him, but not just defending, they were digging, investigating, uncovering. Someone had posted screenshots of Northdale's AP placement stats over the past 10 years. Another user pointed out the racial composition of those classes and how few black students had ever made it into advanced tracks. One user, who claimed to be a former student, wrote a chilling comment. Same school, different year. I was dropped from honors English after scoring higher than the white kids. They said I didn't participate enough. More stories followed. More voices. Anonymous but loud. Stories of being overlooked, undercredited, discouraged from taking advanced classes. One thread mentioned a quiet pattern. Students of color, especially black boys, often steered away from STEM tracks after incidents or teacher concerns. The post started gaining traction. By the third night of Jamal's suspension, one particular post shot to the top of a trending forum, Northdale High's Real Calculus Problem, Racism. It had over 10,000 upvotes, and a long list of comments, some in disbelief, others sharing their own testimonies from across the country. Jamal stared at the screen, overwhelmed, not just by the support but by the realization that this wasn't just about him. It never had been. He wasn't the only one. His story had cracked something open, and now people were looking, closely, critically. The school had wanted to keep things quiet, but the internet wasn't playing along. Late that night, Marcus found Jamal sitting on the couch, staring at his screen with red eyes. "You okay?" Marcus asked softly. Jamal nodded, barely. "They're digging up stuff. Patterns. Records." Marcus sat beside him. "Good. Let the truth talk." "They're mad because I didn't stay invisible," Jamal said. "Because I didn't stay quiet." Marcus put a hand on his son's shoulder. "You weren't born to stay quiet." For a long time, neither said anything. The silence for once felt like safety. But just as the movement gained momentum, a private message popped up on Jamal's screen, from a user with no profile picture, no username history. It read, "You think this is helping you? Keep pushing, and you'll lose more than school." Jamal stared at the anonymous message on his screen. "You think this is helping you? Keep pushing, and you'll lose more than school." No name, no face, just a threat dressed in warning. He read it twice, then 3 more times before slowly closing his laptop. He didn't show it to his father, not yet. Not because he was hiding, but because he needed to understand what he was now part of. This wasn't about a math problem anymore. This was something older, colder, and more deliberate. By the next morning, the Reddit threads had gone deeper. A user named A Northdale alum, 1989, posted a spreadsheet, a copy of old-school board reports pulled from public archives. In it, buried beneath enrollment statistics and demographic summaries, was a pattern hiding in plain sight. Over the past 11 years, black students at Northdale had enrolled in AP-level courses at a drastically lower rate than their white peers, even though standardized test scores showed equal or better performance among several of them. Worse, those who had made it into honors classes often disappeared within a semester, transferred out, reclassified, or placed into alternative learning tracks after undefined behavioral issues. It wasn't just Jamal. He was part of a pattern, a quiet one that spoke in paperwork instead of slurs, in guidance counselor decisions instead of open discrimination. It was polite racism, bureaucratic racism, the kind you couldn't film but could feel. A comment below the spreadsheet chilled Jamal to his core. My little brother got kicked out of AP Physics for attitude problems. Turns out he asked too many questions. Another read. I was the only black girl in AP Chem. Teacher told me, it's okay if you drop. I know this stuff isn't natural for everyone. Jamal leaned back in his chair, his fingers numb. It wasn't an isolated storm. It was a drought stretching back a decade. Then came the twist. A message landed in the inbox of Jamal's cousin, Leah, an outspoken sophomore at a community college nearby. She had been one of the first to defend him publicly, posting the video clip with the caption, "Y'all tried to embarrass him. Now he's exposing the whole system." The message was from a girl named Tasha Morris, now a junior at Howard University. Hey, I saw your post about Jamal. I went to Northdale. I have a story, and I have proof. They set up a video call that night. Tasha appeared on the screen with braids pulled back and eyes sharp with memory. She didn't waste time. I was dropped from AP Stats in junior year, she said, staring straight into the camera. No failing grades, no cheating, just gone. Teacher claimed I was distracting the class. You want to know what that meant? I finished tests early. That was the distraction. Jamal, listening off camera, didn't speak. He just watched. I filed a complaint back then, Tasha continued. Guess what happened? They moved me to regular math. Said it was for my well-being. My mom threatened to go public, but she worked for the district. She knew what would happen if she made noise. Leah leaned forward. Do you still have the paperwork? Tasha reached off screen and held up a thin folder. Every email, every meeting note, every excuse they gave. Within 24 hours, Leah posted a thread titled Northdale Pattern across TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. It wasn't just Jamal's story anymore. It was a chain reaction. And that's when someone unexpected joined the conversation. Dr. Ellis Monroe was a local education activist and retired school psychologist with over 30 years of experience in racially biased education systems. When the hashtag reached her feed, she didn't scroll past. She picked up the Jamal and Marcus met her at a small coffee shop across town. Dr. Monroe arrived with a worn leather binder, notepad, and a look that had seen too many kids fall through cracks. I've been documenting patterns like this since 1997, she said. Without preamble, you're not the first, but you might be the loudest. She explained how schools across the country had long used academic discretion to keep classrooms racially homogeneous, how teachers and counselors wielded subtle power, framing curiosity as defiance, labeling potential as disruption, how the most common weapon used wasn't violence, but doubt. Gifted black children are the most gaslit population in the education system, she said. You're made to feel like your brilliance is a burden. Marcus clenched his fists in his lap. Jamal stayed still. Dr. Monroe flipped open her binder and began listing former students, names, dates, incidents, each story eerily close to Jamal's. Some ended with students leaving the school. Others ended with mental breakdowns. A few just disappeared from the record. I've been waiting, she said, for the right case to break this open. Jamal didn't flinch. Then let's break it. And just like that, a local narrative became a legal one. Dr. Monroe connected them to a civil rights attorney. Leah built a database of former students willing to testify. Tasha's documents were scanned, organized, and uploaded to a shared drive titled Evidence Northdale. The momentum was growing, not in fire but in pressure, quiet, steady, unstoppable. But the pressure had a price. Jamal's inbox began flooding with more threats. Some veiled, others bold. Comments under his photos, DMs from burner accounts. One message said simply, "Smart doesn't make you safe. Remember that." And then, a breakthrough. An email landed in Dr. Monroe's inbox with the subject line, Media Inquiry. You urgent. An interview with Jamal Reed. On camera. Full story. Jamal read the message 3 times. He knew what it meant. A chance to be heard. A chance to be seen for who he truly was. Not just the janitor's son, Not just the viral kid, but the first voice in a silence that had lasted too long. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. Only if you're ready. Jamal didn't hesitate. I've been ready. But as they prepared for the interview, someone inside the school leaked confidential records about Jamal's disciplinary history and twisted the narrative to make him look like a threat. The cameras were smaller than Jamal expected, and the set felt more like someone's minimalist living room than a national newsroom. Still, the gravity of the moment wrapped around his chest like a coiled spring. He sat upright, notebook in his lap, while the producer adjusted the microphone clip to his collar. Across from him sat Elise Monroe, not related to Dr. Monroe, though the coincidence felt poetic. Elise was one of the Chronicle's most respected investigative journalists, known for exposing systemic injustice in education, housing, and law enforcement. She wasn't there for a fluff piece. She had read every document, spoken to every former student Leah connected her with, and watched the full unedited classroom video more than a dozen times. She leaned forward, her voice low but firm. You don't have to say anything you're not ready to say. But this is your space now. Jamal.
The camera light blinked red.
And Jamal began. He spoke slowly at first. Carefully. He described the day Mr. Callahan called him to the board. The snickers. The silence. The moment everything flipped. Then he talked about what came next. Not in a dramatic, teary way, but with a clarity that made the weight even heavier. I didn't cheat, he said. I studied on my own, because no one ever offered to teach me. I stayed after school, while my dad cleaned bathrooms. I watched lectures, while people played video games. I didn't do this to go viral. I did it because I wanted to know if I could. He opened his notebook, his mother's notebook, and explained the calculus problem, line by line, in language that was accessible but still brilliant. Not just math, but intention, thought, discipline. I don't want to be exceptional, he said at one point. I want to be seen, not as a threat, not as a fluke, just as a student who works hard. The segment aired 2 days later. It ran during prime time on the Chronicle's YouTube channel and syndicated across social platforms. The response was immediate.
Millions watched. Comments poured in by the second.
Celebrities tweeted support. STEM organizations reposted the clip with captions like "Future Innovator" and "Proof that brilliance exists where we least expect it, because we never looked."
But not everyone clapped. Within hours, conservative pundits latched onto the story with ferocity. On cable news, Jamal was labeled a manufactured victim, a media puppet, and even an example of woke math gone wild. They didn't attack his work. They attacked his right to be taken seriously. Screens flashed with cherry-picked quotes. Hostile debates erupted over whether he deserved the praise or if the country was just overcorrecting. Even worse, local backlash intensified. Northdale's parent group email chain, previously used for bake sales and PTA meetings, now hosted furious debates. Some called for an audit of the math department. Others demanded Mr. Callahan be reinstated as a trusted authority. And Mr. Callahan? He wasn't quiet anymore. During an interview on a local radio station, he played the victim card with surgical precision. I've dedicated 22 years to teaching, he said. It's unfortunate that a spontaneous moment, intended to motivate a student, has been twisted into some kind of racial narrative. I never intended to embarrass Jamal. I was trying to engage him. Now I'm being targeted, harassed, labeled a racist, over a joke. He paused for emphasis. I'm being canceled over calculus. The host sympathized. It seems like teachers can't win these days. And just like that, the man who tried to humiliate a student became a martyr for a different crowd. Still, the district could no longer ignore the noise. Faced with mounting public pressure, internal documents being leaked, and hashtags like Northdale Exposed trending, the school board scheduled a special closed-door session. No students, no cameras, just damage control. Inside that meeting, reports were reviewed. Whispers about legal risk bounced off white walls. One board member reportedly asked, how bad would it look if we removed the teacher versus if we disciplined the student? But Jamal had already won in one arena, the public eye. The day after the interview aired, a scholarship foundation reached out. Then 2 more. A Black-led tech startup offered Jamal a paid mentorship. A university in Boston invited him to visit their campus. STEM podcasts called high schoolers across the country messaged him, saying, I'm studying harder because of you. And then the twist came. A new file surfaced on a conservative blog. Leaked screenshots. Discipline records. Old counselor notes. Some dating back to Jamal's middle school years. Times he had stood up to bullies, or refused to let a classmate cheat off his paper. Incidents twisted and inflated. Notes reading. Defensive when challenged. And tends to isolate himself, were framed as signs of instability. The blog framed it like a revelation. Troubling history of viral math prodigy. Revealed. Jamal's face was plastered next to words like confrontational, non-compliant, and manipulative. They didn't show the context. They didn't care. Within hours it was clear where the leak had come from.
Mr. Callahan.
He still had access to school records, or knew someone who did. And someone let him use that access to stain Jamal's name. Marcus slammed the laptop shut when he saw the post. "They're not just trying to silence you," he said. "They're trying to make you disappear." Jamal sat in stunned silence. The feeling wasn't shock. It was betrayal. Deep, bone-cutting betrayal. The system didn't just doubt him. It was actively rooting against him. His hands trembled. "They think if they make me look like a problem, people will stop listening," he said. "But they're wrong," Marcus replied. "Because now people are listening." But before Jamal could respond, Dr. Monroe called with urgent news. An internal whistleblower from the school had come forward, and they weren't just leaking records. They were ready to testify. The news cycle shifted like a blade, twisting slowly. One day, Jamal was the quiet genius who humbled a teacher and inspired a nation. The next he was troubled, confrontational, difficult, all because of one coordinated leak, weaponizing scraps from his past to rewrite his entire story. The local media didn't need to lie. They just needed to omit. They aired segments about his disciplinary history, without mentioning that the infractions were for standing up to bullies who spat racial slurs or knocked his books out of his hands. They showed a document from 8th grade where he refused to follow instructions, without noting that the instructions were to ignore another student calling him a monkey. One anchor, her voice syrupy with false concern, read directly from a highlighted excerpt. "Student exhibits signs of isolation, reactivity, and defensiveness." She looked into the camera and said, "It raises the question, is this the profile of a role model?" Jamal watched it unfold in real time, each word a small incision. The version of him the world had just started to believe in was being slowly replaced by someone he didn't recognize. Meanwhile, the town of Northdale began to fracture. Yard signs appeared overnight. Some read, "Protect our teachers." Others said, "We stand with Jamal." Tensions reached boiling point in PTA meetings and Facebook comment threads. Local radio hosts debated whether he should be allowed back in school, whether the district was bending to woke pressure, or whether Jamal had been part of a larger agenda from the start. The same people who had never said his name now couldn't stop speaking it with disdain. And Marcus?
He felt it first.
One night, he returned to the janitor locker room to find his locker door hanging open. Inside, someone had poured bleach over his uniform. On the metal door, written in permanent marker, "Clean up your own mess, read." The school never confirmed who did it. No cameras, no accountability, just quiet damage. Marcus didn't report it. He went home, scrubbed the uniform, and stitched the name patch back on by hand. He didn't want to tell Jamal, but Jamal saw his hands trembling that night. "Did someone touch your stuff?" Jamal asked. Marcus hesitated, then nodded once. "They think hurting you'll shut me up," Jamal said, voice flat.
Marcus looked at him. "You sure you want to keep going?"
Jamal didn't blink. "I was born in a system that wanted me small. If I quit now, I make their job easy." But the hits kept coming. Jamal's DMs overflowed. Anonymous accounts sent voice notes, laced with racial slurs. Someone created a fake profile, with his face captioned, "Affirmative Action All-Star." Another message simply said, "Don't get too comfortable, know your place." He never replied. But the weight grew heavier every day. Leah monitored his mentions, deleting what she could. Dr. Monroe kept records of every threat. The attorney cataloged screenshots. But it didn't change the truth. Jamal was a teenager, and the noise was deafening. One night he stood in the bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand, staring at his reflection like he wasn't sure who he was anymore. Not the math prodigy, not the janitor's son, just a kid in the middle of a firestorm he never asked to light. Behind him, Marcus appeared in the doorway. "You know," he said gently, "they only come at you this hard when you've already won something they thought was theirs." Jamal didn't look away from the mirror. "Then why does it feel like I'm losing?" Marcus stepped closer. "Because you care more than they ever could. And that's not weakness. That's power." But even power gets tired. The smear campaign worked, at least in part. Offers that had once come in daily, now slowed. A few organizations retracted public support, citing controversy. A well-known STEM nonprofit postponed their invitation to review the ongoing situation. The implication was clear. Even brilliance came with conditions. And then, amid the silence, something unexpected broke through. One email. Subject line: Inquiry from Prof. Daniel Hurst, Department of Mathematics, Stanford University. Jamal clicked it without breathing. The message was short, direct. Mr. Reed, I followed your story and reviewed your classroom video. Your intuitive grasp of multivariable calculus, particularly under pressure, is beyond rare. I'm writing to personally offer you a remote audit opportunity for 2 of our undergraduate math courses this semester, with direct mentorship. No application, no tuition, just space to grow. If you're interested, let me know. Daniel Hurst. Jamal read it twice. Then a third time. He didn't even realize he was shaking. Dad, he called out, voice tight. Marcus rushed in. Jamal held up the laptop, tears building at the corners of his eyes, but not from sadness. Marcus leaned in, reading the screen. After a long silence, he said quietly, "Looks like someone finally saw the real you." Jamal whispered, "They tried to bury me." Marcus nodded. "And you just grew through concrete." But just as they celebrated, Jamal's phone lit up with a text from a blocked number. "Take the offer, and watch what happens to your father's job." Jamal stared at the text, the words sharp and cold. "Take the offer, and watch what happens to your father's job." No sender ID, no clue where it came from. Just a threat laced with leverage, dirty, personal, and effective. For a long minute he didn't move. The excitement that had surged through him when he read Professor Hurst's email now dissolved into a familiar pit, fear, not for himself, but for his father. Every opportunity Jamal gained seemed to cast a shadow over Marcus, as if the cost of rising was watching the ground beneath someone you love start to shake. He called Leah first. She picked up immediately. "You got the offer?" she asked breathlessly. "Yeah, but someone already tried to scare me out of taking it." There was a pause. Then, steady as always, she replied, "Then that means you have to take it." Jamal didn't speak. "You've been playing chess since you were 12, Jay. Don't let them checkmate you with fear." He didn't sleep that night. Neither did Marcus. He didn't need to see the message to know something was coming. When Jamal told him, his only response was quiet, unwavering. "Let them come for me." "But you go." The next morning, Jamal emailed Professor Hurst. "I accept. I'm ready." And just like that, the world changed again. Within 48 hours, Jamal received secure login credentials, access to digital libraries, and an intro packet outlining his first 2 courses, linear algebra with proofs in advanced multivariable calculus. The materials were dense, the pace grueling. Most of the other students were already college level, and many came from prep academies and elite institutions, but none of them had studied by flashlight in an empty classroom. Jamal logged in from a borrowed Chromebook, headphones on, back straight, eyes locked on the screen. The first lecture moved fast. Notations, matrix theory, eigenvalues. He took notes with both hands, paused, replayed, asked questions on the forums. And when the first quiz posted, he submitted his answers an hour before the deadline. He scored 1, but while Jamal was quietly excelling, the world outside his screen boiled louder than ever. News of his Stanford enrollments spread like wildfire. What should have been a moment of community pride instead turned into a polarizing headline. High school student at center of controversy gets special access to elite university. Local Facebook groups lit up. Parents ranted about preferential treatment and reverse discrimination. One post read, "Why does he get into Stanford? My kid's been busting their tail for years and doesn't get an email back." Another commenter said bluntly, "They're just giving out spots now to make themselves look inclusive." Some even called for a district investigation into Jamal's family, into Stanford, into whether the university had violated enrollment protocols. And at the center of this growing chorus stood Mr. Callahan. He returned to school emboldened, not just by sympathy, but by strategy. He began quietly organizing concerned staff and parents, hosting community forums under the guise of preserving academic standards. In those meetings, he used polite language, but seeded insidious ideas. "We're not saying Jamal isn't bright," he'd say. But we need to ensure there's academic integrity. He painted himself as a martyr of cancel culture, a victim of misunderstanding, and then, more carefully, a guardian of fairness. Behind closed doors, he circulated documents, real or fabricated, questioning Jamal's academic record, highlighting moments of disruption in class, and subtly implying that Jamal's rise came not from genius, but from media manipulation. And people listened. One teacher told a colleague, "I always thought he was too quiet, like he was hiding something." Another said, "I mean, what if this Stanford thing is just PR? You know how these universities get." While Jamal solved proofs in silence, others tried to prove he didn't belong. And yet, week by week, he rose, faster than anyone expected. His Stanford TA, a grad student named Priya, reached out after his third quiz submission. "You're not just keeping up," she wrote. "You're outpacing students who've had private tutors since middle school." Jamal replied, "Thanks. Don't have a tutor. I have a broom closet and a notebook." Still, the doubt lingered, not in his mind, but around him. In every hallway, every whispered conversation, every side-eye from a teacher who once ignored him. Until one day, it turned physical. Jamal had returned to campus after hours to use the school's only reliable high-speed internet for his Stanford midterm. The building was mostly empty, custodial staff on one end, office doors locked. He sat alone in the library's back corner, hoodie up, headphones in. When the test ended, he closed his laptop, stood to stretch, and noticed a folded piece of paper slid under his chair. He picked it up, unfolded it, scrawled in black ink, "One more step out of line and you'll end up like your mom. Buried and forgotten." Jamal froze. He looked around, but the hallway outside was empty. The building suddenly felt too quiet. He slipped the note into his backpack, walked calmly to the front exit, and only exhaled once he stepped outside under the parking lot lights. He didn't tell Marcus that night, not because he wanted to protect him, but because for the first time Jamal realized they weren't just afraid of his mind. They were afraid of what would happen if he used it publicly, and succeeded. The next morning, Jamal received an envelope in his locker. Inside was a printout of his mother's obituary, with the words "Next" written in red. Jamal didn't say a word on the ride to school. The envelope lay deep in his backpack, but its contents seared through every thought like a hot brand. His mother's obituary, photocopied, grainy, intimate, now violated with one blood-red word: "Next." He hadn't shown it to Marcus. Not yet. He was still trying to convince himself it wasn't what it looked like. That maybe, it was just another cruel prank from someone desperate for attention. But deep down, he knew better. When he reached his locker, the hallway was unusually quiet. A few students lingered, whispering. Eyes tracked him, not with curiosity anymore, but discomfort, like he was a walking accusation, a reminder of something too loud to ignore, too dangerous to accept. In second period, he sat frozen. His body was present, but his mind looped the image of the obituary, the word "next," echoing like a countdown. By lunch, he couldn't keep it in anymore. He texted Dr. Monroe, "I got a threat this morning." Not a message. A printed copy of my mom's obituary. Someone wrote "next" in red. She called him immediately. "Where is it now?" "In my backpack." "Don't throw it away. Bag it. We're treating this like evidence." "Should I tell the school?" Dr. Monroe paused. "Yes, but don't expect them to take it seriously. We're going to document everything. You hear me? Everything." Jamal nodded, even though she couldn't see it. That afternoon, he walked into the assistant principal's office, palms sweating. Mr. Green looked up, impatient. "I got a threat," Jamal said quietly. "In my locker." "What kind of threat?" Jamal pulled out the sealed Ziploc bag, with the letter inside. Green squinted, then sighed. "Okay. Well, that's definitely disturbing." Jamal waited for a next step. There was none. "I think we should report it. Maybe check the cameras," Jamal said carefully. Green waved a hand. "Honestly, it looks like a prank. High school kids say all kinds of stupid things. Do you have any reason to believe someone actually intends to harm you?" Jamal stared at him. "Would you ask that if I were white?" Green's face hardened. "That's not fair."
No.
Jamal said, standing up. "What's not fair is treating this like a joke when you wouldn't hesitate if this was your son." He walked out. The next morning, Jamal told Marcus everything. The note. The red ink. The administration's dismissal. Marcus didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, it was with the quiet resolve of a man who'd buried a wife and was now trying not to lose a son. You don't go back until we figure this out.
But Dad, I've got.
I said no. Jamal didn't argue. The next day, he stayed home. Leah dropped off lecture notes. Dr. Monroe contacted legal aid. Jamal logged into his Stanford class and tried to focus, but his hands trembled over every key, and then came the fire. It happened 3 nights later. 10:40. A janitor on the night shift called 911, reporting heavy smoke in the West Wing. By the time firefighters arrived, the fire had already gutted a storage room used for custodial supplies, brooms, cleaning chemicals, mops, and Marcus's personal locker. The blaze didn't spread, but the damage was enough to raise alarms. Fire inspectors found a small gas canister and a charred rag soaked in solvent. Arson. The building was evacuated and shut down for the next 2 days. Local news outlets showed up in the morning. Drones flying overhead. Parents gathered outside the gates, murmuring about safety, targeted attacks, and racial tension. That afternoon, Marcus was called into a private meeting with the superintendent. They didn't accuse him. Not directly. They asked questions in the shape of accusations. Were you working late that night? No, I was home. Any reason someone would want to hurt you or use your locker? I'm a janitor. I clean messes. That's my job. I don't make them. Still, the implication hung heavy. The next morning, the local paper ran the headline, "Fire linked to custodial wing investigation ongoing." By lunchtime, rumors erupted. They're saying Jamal's dad did it. Maybe he got mad about all the press. I heard he threatened the principal last year.
None of it was true.
All of it stuck. At 2:30 p.m., Marcus received a formal letter from the district, placed on administrative leave pending investigation, effective immediately, without pay. He didn't even finish reading it before folding it in half and walking out. At home, he stood in the doorway and told Jamal, voice steady but broken. They found their excuse. Jamal's chest collapsed inward. What do you mean? I've been working that school 20 years. Not one complaint. Not one incident. And now, one fire near my mop closet. And I'm a suspect. Jamal sat down, trying to breathe through the guilt choking his ribs. They're coming for me through you, he said. Marcus looked at his son. No, they're coming for themselves. And they're trying to make us believe we lit the match. But the fire wasn't just physical anymore. It was psychological. It spread into Jamal's bones, his memory, the safety of his home. The same halls he used to sweep with his father. The desks he studied under. The walls that once held silence, now all turned against them. And still, the question echoed. Why was a boy solving a math problem so dangerous? That night, a sealed envelope appeared on their doorstep, containing still frames from security footage that had mysteriously disappeared from the school's system. And in one of them, a face no one expected to see. The envelope was thick, unmarked, and taped to the front door with surgical precision. No name, no return address, just waiting, like a loaded gun on the welcome mat. Jamal peeled the tape back slowly, hands trembling. Inside were high-resolution printouts. Stills from surveillance footage, some clearly from inside Northdale High. The timestamps matched the night of the fire. Most were grainy, shadows bleeding into corners. But one frame, sharp and clean, made his breath catch. A hallway. A figure. Hoodie up, head turned slightly toward the camera.
Not Marcus.
Not Jamal. It was Mr. Callahan. Jamal dropped the printout on the table like it burned. Marcus walked over silently and picked it up, staring at the face. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. No one was supposed to have access to that footage. Security feeds were supposedly inconclusive, per the district's statement. And yet here it was, clear as day, evident. But evidence of what? They couldn't go to the school. Not now. Not after the way Marcus had been treated. They sent it straight to Dr. Monroe, who confirmed that it had already been scrubbed from the official file. Someone inside the system was trying to protect Mr. Callahan, and someone else had just blown that apart. But even with the image in hand, nothing changed overnight. Callahan still taught. The district remained silent. And Marcus? Still on unpaid leave. So Jamal did the only thing he could. He kept studying. He didn't announce his Stanford lectures to anyone. Not anymore. He logged in late at night, behind closed doors, earbuds in, heart pounding like someone was always watching. The world outside questioned his legitimacy, but inside those digital classrooms, Numbers still made sense. Logic didn't discriminate. And even with the chaos around him, Jamal excelled. By week 4 he was answering questions on the forums that full-time undergrads couldn't grasp. Priya, his TA, messaged him directly. "You're going to change the field. I hope you know that." That he didn't feel like a prodigy. He felt like a fugitive. Brilliant, but hunted. Still, something inside him refused to break. He started reaching out to students, quiet ones. Like him, kids of color in his school who had been overlooked, underestimated, or completely ignored. He started meeting them in empty classrooms after hours. Not with fanfare. Just books, equations, space to breathe. They called it the underground. A nod to more than just the physical secrecy. Jamal taught them how to work backward through proofs. How to see math not as punishment, but as power. How to outthink systems built to keep them small. But as his reach grew, so did resistance. One afternoon, Leah burst into the house, phone in hand. "You need to hear this," she said, panting. She played a voice memo, a shaky recording from a sophomore girl named Denise. In it, Mr. Callahan's voice was unmistakable, caught mid-conversation in the teacher's lounge. "They're treating that kid like he's some kind of messiah. Please, if he's so smart, let him solve poverty too." Another voice laughed. Then Callahan again. "Give it time. He'll crack. They always do." Jamal stood frozen. It wasn't just the cruelty. It was the calm confidence in Callahan's tone. The way he spoke like it was inevitable. Like Jamal's collapse was just part of the curriculum. The recording went viral overnight. The district scrambled. Damage control was swift. But not sincere. The next day, Marcus received a letter. Not an apology. Not reinstatement. An offer. A settlement. It came in a sleek envelope from a downtown law firm. $20,000 in exchange for silence. A non-disclosure agreement attached. No lawsuit. No reinstatement. No public statements. Just disappear. They offered Jamal one too. Another $10,000. And a written letter of miscommunication. Signed by the district. In return, he would agree not to testify. Not to speak further to the media. Not to pursue legal action. It was hush money. Marcus read the letter 3 times, then set it down carefully. "Son," he said, voice low. "This is what they think your future's worth." Jamal didn't respond. He didn't have to. He tore the letter in half. Then into quarters. Then into dust. Later that night, he emailed Dr. Monroe. Subject: deposition. Message: "I'm ready to testify. Put me on the record." But just as his statement was finalized, an anonymous tipster sent Dr. Monroe a warning. If Jamal speaks under oath, there's more than just Callahan at risk. Check the superintendent's old emails before you move. The gymnasium didn't feel like a school anymore. It felt like a courtroom. Rows of plastic chairs stretched across the hardwood floor, filled with faces from every part of Northdale. Teachers, students, exhausted parents, news crews with flashing badges, and locals who hadn't stepped foot on school property in years. It smelled of nerves, dust, and tension. The basketball hoops had been cranked to the ceiling, as if even the backboards wanted to disappear from what was about to unfold. At the center sat the school board, a row of suited figures behind a long table with microphones, name placards, and manufactured expressions of concern. Superintendent Whitmore sat with his arms crossed, flanked by legal counsel. A banner behind them read, "Special Administrative Review, Northdale Unified." But it was more than that now. This wasn't just a hearing. It was Judgment Day. At the front of the room, Jamal adjusted the mic, trying not to fidget. His palms were slick, his breath steady but deep. Priya had flown in from Stanford and sat 2 rows back. Dr. Monroe was on the end of the first row, flanked by Leah and a few other students from the underground. Behind them, parents, some supportive, some skeptical, all waiting. Jamal looked up and spoke. He didn't stammer. He didn't perform. He told the truth. From the calculus problem Mr. Callahan used to humiliate him, to the viral video, to the threats, the note, the obituary, the fire, he described the night he found the footage at his door, the hush money, the recordings, the system, and he did it without tears. He didn't need pity. He needed the truth to be heard. "I was never the problem," he said. "The problem was that I made you look, and what you saw scared you." He paused, scanning the room. "You tried to erase me with silence, with paperwork, with fear. But I learned how to solve problems, and I learned that when systems fail us, we don't wait, we reveal." A silence fell like gravity. Then, Marcus stepped up. He didn't read from paper. He didn't even sit. He just stood at the microphone in his work boots and janitor shirt, creased from years of labor, stained from the life they lived. "I've been cleaning this school for 2 decades," he said. "Long before any of you knew my son's name." He pointed toward the back row. "I've wiped your desks, unclogged your toilets, hauled your trash while you had meetings about test scores and sports funding, and I did it because I believe in the power of school, of opportunity." He turned slowly toward the board. "But it's hard to believe in a place that never sees you, that uses your labor but doubts your child's brilliance. You didn't just doubt my son, you tried to kill the idea of him." The silence deepened. "And still," Marcus added. He rose. The room broke into scattered applause, but the board didn't clap. Their faces stayed neutral. One member whispered to another. The legal counsel scribbled something on a yellow pad. It was clear. They were listening. But they hadn't decided. The moderator stood. "We appreciate the testimony. At this time we will recess." A voice cut through the micless space. "Wait." Everyone turned. A girl stood from the middle row. White, junior varsity volleyball jacket, blonde ponytail trembling slightly. Her name tag read Emily Carson. She walked slowly to the front. "I need to speak." The moderator hesitated. "You weren't on the list to testify." Emily didn't flinch. "That's because I was too afraid." She looked at Jamal, then at the crowd. "I'm the one who printed the obituary," she said. Gasps rippled through the room like a breaking wave. "I didn't write next, but I slid it into his locker. I thought it was just a joke. I didn't think." Her voice cracked. "I did it because Mr. Callahan said Jamal needed to be put back in place. He said it with a laugh, but everyone knew what it meant." The gym fell still. Emily's hands shook. "I'm not saying this to ask for forgiveness. I need to stop pretending like this wasn't my fault too." She turned toward the board. "And if you ignore what happened here today, you're no better than me." Then she walked back to her seat. And the room exploded. Not in cheers, but in truth. Murmurs. Shock. Even tears. The board sat stiffly. But their silence this time wasn't power. It was panic. Just as the board scrambled to regain control, a journalist from the back stood and shouted, "We've just received leaked emails. Superintendent Whitmore knew about the footage weeks ago and buried it." For a split second, no one moved. The journalist's voice still echoed off the gymnasium walls. "Superintendent Whitmore knew about the footage weeks ago and buried it." Whitmore's jaw twitched. He reached for his microphone with a stiff robotic motion. But the damage had already landed. Cameras turned. Phones lifted. The board's carefully controlled hearing had shattered, and the cracks were spreading fast. In the second row, a hand went up. A boy, tall, pale, hair cut short like someone who always followed the rules, stood. His voice trembled, but not with fear. With clarity. "My name is Owen Brooks," he said. "Senior. Former TA for Mr. Callahan's AP class." Heads turned. "I wasn't going to speak," Owen continued. "But Emily's confession made me realize I can't stay quiet either." Jamal locked eyes with him. He recognized Owen, quiet, always near Callahan's desk, a blur of motion during grading sessions. Never unkind, but never particularly visible either. Owen took a breath. "I was in the room the day Mr. Callahan wrote that calculus problem on the board. He practiced it twice before class. Said he was going to put the janitor's son on the spot. Said, and I quote, 'Let's see how the scholarship system handles this.'" The room inhaled collectively. "But that's not all," Owen added, now holding a small USB stick in the air. "I copied a folder off his computer. I know I wasn't supposed to, but I did. I saw emails, notes." He told other teachers Jamal was too confident for someone with his background. He encouraged students privately to make Jamal uncomfortable. Called it a lesson in humility. Someone gasped. Another person muttered, "Oh my God." "And the fire?" Owen's voice cracked. "I know who did it." He paused. "A student named Brian Marks. He told me he was going to scare Jamal out of coming back. Said, 'Let's smoke him out. He doesn't belong here anyway.'" Dr. Monroe stood, hand over her mouth. Whitmore tried again to regain control. "We can't confirm any of." "Don't lie," Owen said, cutting him off. "You were CC'd on the email about the footage. You had it. You knew." Jamal's heart pounded like a war drum. For so long he had been fighting a system made of shadows. Things unseen, unproven. But now, the shadows had names, faces. Receipts. Owen stepped down. As he walked past Jamal, he nodded once. No apology, just recognition. For a moment, no one moved. Then the school board's attorney whispered something urgently into the chairperson's ear. The chairperson leaned into the microphone. This hearing is now entering executive review. Translation damage control. But it was too late. The press surged forward. Cameras rolled. Hashtags exploded. Callahan exposed. And Whitmore knew trended within an hour. By evening, Mr. Callahan had been removed from Northdale High, suspended indefinitely pending termination. But he didn't go quietly. The very next morning, his attorney issued a public statement. Mr. Callahan is a decorated educator who has become the latest victim of a targeted smear campaign. He categorically denies all accusations and will be filing a wrongful termination lawsuit against the district for defamation, emotional distress, and breach of contract. He even named Jamal in the filing as a central figure in the orchestrated takedown. Jamal read the statement in stunned silence. "They're trying to flip it again," Leah whispered. "They're trying to make you the aggressor." Marcus put a hand on his son's shoulder. "They don't know you've been preparing for this your whole life." Jamal looked at him. "But what if this doesn't end? What if they just keep coming?" Marcus gave him the kind of look only a man who's mopped floors while being called boy could give. "Then we keep standing." But just as they began preparing for court, Monroe uncovered one final document, buried in the district archives, an internal memo dated 3 years earlier, detailing how Northdale High had a diversity control quota designed to cap the number of black students in advanced placement classes. They say when a building collapses, the dust chokes everyone, even the ones who didn't build it. That's what it felt like in Northdale after the hearing. Truth had erupted in public, but the system that bred the lie didn't fall. It recoiled, tightened, retaliated. Mr. Callahan's lawsuit wasn't just a legal move. It was a statement, a message to the rest of the district. We protect our own. He filed a 20-page complaint accusing the school board of knee-jerk political decisions, reputation damage, and wrongful defamation instigated by student manipulation. The words "trial by social media" appeared 5 separate times. He demanded reinstatement, back pay, and punitive damages. In a final twist, he included Jamal's name under a claim of character assault and incitement of targeted harassment. It was audacious, and it was designed to wear them down. But Jamal's legal team didn't blink. Under the guidance of Dr. Monroe and a national civil rights attorney from Chicago, they launched a countersuit on behalf of Jamal, Marcus, and a growing list of former students and parents who came forward in the days after the hearing. One by one, the stories poured in. A mother from 2015 recalled her son being dropped from AP Chemistry after scoring in the top 10% statewide. A girl from 2018 shared how a counselor told her to aim lower in college applications, because not everyone's built for Harvard. A former custodian admitted he once overheard a teacher laughing about keeping things orderly in the advanced program. Orderly meaning white. The district tried to dismiss these claims as anecdotal, coincidence, misunderstandings. But the receipts said otherwise. Dr. Monroe unearthed the final blow, a 3-year-old internal memo, marked confidential, outlining a diversity management policy that capped the percentage of black students in advanced placement courses under the justification of maintaining academic integrity and reducing behavioral strain. They called it a safeguard. What it really was segregation in a new suit. The memo leaked, and the media pounced. National news anchors shifted focus from the Callahan hearing to systemic corruption. Headlines read, "Northdale's Quiet Quota, How a School Board Built a Glass Ceiling, and Brown Desks, White Ceilings." Investigative reporters dug into district funding records, discovered that Northdale High's advanced programs received nearly 30% more funding per capita than standard courses, most of which were filled with students of color. Even extracurricular opportunities were found to be filtered. Black students underrepresented in STEM clubs, debate teams, even National Honor Society nominations. The school board held an emergency press conference, but the tone had shifted. The people weren't just watching, they were angry. And this time, the board knew they couldn't spin it. Still, they tried to survive it. Superintendent Whitmore quietly announced his retirement, for personal reasons. He left with full benefits and a retirement package. Callahan, despite overwhelming evidence, remained free and unapologetic. And then came the letter from Marcus Reed. It arrived in a simple envelope. No signatures, no apology. Just one line: "We are reinstating your position effective immediately. Back pay will be calculated." Marcus read it once. then folded it in half, placed it on the table, and walked outside. Jamal followed. "You're not taking it?" he asked. Marcus stared out at the street. "I cleaned up after people who didn't see me. Now they see me, and they're scared. That's not the kind of job I want back." "You earned it." "I earned more than a mop in a hallway," Marcus said quietly. Jamal didn't argue. He just nodded. But the system wasn't done with them. The backlash came quietly. Emails that were accidentally lost, delays in court filings, even a failed attempt by a school board member to have the countersuit thrown out as student activism gone too far. But none of it worked, because the truth had already breached the surface. And then, one morning, Jamal received an email that made him drop his pen mid-equation. Subject: National Education Equity Summit. Keynote invitation. Body: Mr. Jamal Reed. We are honored to invite you to share your story and vision at the upcoming National Education Equity Summit in Washington, D.C. This year's theme is Breaking the Mold. Voices from the front lines. We believe your voice belongs at the center of that conversation. Let us know if you'll stand with us. Jamal read it again. And again. He turned the screen toward Marcus. His father smiled. "Looks like they want to hear from the janitor's son." Jamal stared at the words. For the first time in months, the weight didn't feel like pressure. It felt like purpose. But just as Jamal was about to accept, an email pinged from an unknown address. Subject line: "You speak on that stage, and we'll release everything your mother hid, including what really happened in two." Jamal stared at the screen, the subject line flashing like a taunt: "You speak on that stage, and we'll release everything your mother hid, including what really happened in two." He didn't know what to make of it. He was only a kid in 2009, and his mother, Ava Reed, had never been a person who left chaos in her wake. If anything, she was the glue that once held everything together. But whoever sent the email knew enough to weaponize her memory, and that alone was enough to shake him. He didn't respond. He forwarded the message to Dr. Monroe. She replied almost instantly. "Empty threat. Designed to break your momentum. Let them talk about the past. Your truth is stronger than their fear." Jamal closed his laptop slowly, and the next morning, he clicked accept invitation. Washington, D.C. felt like another planet compared to the world he came from. The air buzzed with a different kind of energy. Fast-paced, focused, layered with ambition. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. Handshakes from strangers in tailored suits, gift baskets in hotel rooms, press kits with his name printed on thick, glossy paper. The National Education Equity Summit was held in a hall that looked more like a presidential ballroom than a conference space. Chandeliers, cameras, people with notepads and iPads, all watching him with the kind of curiosity usually reserved for celebrities or scandals. Marcus sat near the front. He wore the same boots he'd cleaned classrooms in, but this time, with a blazer Jamal had bought him. His calloused hands gripped the armrests, not from nerves, but pride held tight. When Jamal stepped on stage, the crowd stood. He didn't look down at notes. He didn't need to. "My name is Jamal Reed," he began, voice steady, "and for most of my life, I was invisible." He let that hang in the air. "I was the boy who cleaned chalk dust off your desks when no one else was watching. I was the kid people saw but didn't see. I was labeled gifted only after I embarrassed a teacher. But I've been solving problems since before you gave me permission." The room fell silent, breathless. I wasn't exceptional because I was black, and I wasn't shocking because I was brilliant. What was shocking is that a system designed to filter me out couldn't stop me from breaking through. He shared it all. Not with anger, not to shame, but to illuminate. How he taught himself calculus in a janitor's closet. How he was mocked for daring to answer a question meant to humiliate him. How the same people who ignored his brilliance tried to erase it the moment it became inconvenient. And then he said something that made every journalist in the room look up. "Excellence should never have to come with proof of innocence." That line hit like thunder. And from that moment, everything changed again. Clips of Jamal's speech flooded social media within the hour. The hashtag Jamal Reed trended globally for 2 straight days. Educators across the country quoted his words in classrooms. Podcasts replayed his entire 18-minute keynote. Activists called him the new voice of educational justice. And the responses weren't just likes and reposts. They were real. 3 Ivy League schools offered him full scholarships. No application needed. A fellowship from the National Science Foundation arrived in the mail. Even NASA reached out, offering him a summer internship on a student-led satellite project. But the most meaningful offer didn't come in an email. It came from Marcus. Sitting across from Jamal one night in their living room, Marcus unfolded a handwritten plan. "I want to start something," he said. "Not just for you, for the other ones. The ones still cleaning, still doubting, still waiting for someone to see them." It was the blueprint for a foundation. Read Rising Engineers, Educators and Dreamers. A nonprofit focused on giving Black students access to STEM mentorship, books, tech, scholarships, and most importantly, belief. Jamal stared at the name. "You really want to do this?" Marcus shrugged. "I've been cleaning up messes for 20 years. Might be time to build something instead." The foundation launched 2 weeks later. Donations poured in faster than expected. First from Jamal's supporters, then from tech companies. A former Northdale student who became an engineer anonymously dropped The first Reed scholar was a shy middle schooler named Malik, who had once been suspended for doodling in math class. That doodle was a self-made graph of a parabolic arc. And as for Jamal, he kept studying, kept teaching, kept building. One afternoon, just weeks after the summit, he walked off stage at a university youth event and was handed an envelope, no return address but thick with purpose. Inside was a single page on letterhead he recognized instantly. Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Office of Undergraduate Admissions. His eyes scanned the words. "Dear Mr. Jamal Reed, we've been following your journey with awe and admiration. Your mind belongs here. Your voice belongs here. You belong here. We are offering you early admission with full honors and a 4-year scholarship. No conditions. No footnotes. Just belief." But before he could even smile, he noticed a second slip of paper tucked behind the offer. An old photo of his mother, in an MIT lab coat, and a handwritten note on the back. "Don't let them bury what I started." The sun hit the front of Northdale High differently now. Not because the building had changed. Same bricks, same squeaky double doors. But because of what lived inside the walls. Time had passed. 4 years. To be exact. And on a crisp fall morning, the same school that once tried to erase Jamal Reed now welcomed him back with applause, flyers, and a parking space labeled "Guest Faculty, STEM Mentor in Residence." The irony wasn't lost on him. He stepped out of a modest black sedan, bag over his shoulder, hoodie zipped halfway, sunglasses tucked into his shirt collar. He wasn't famous in the way celebrities were, but in Northdale, Jamal's name carried weight. The kind that silenced rooms and opened doors that used to be locked. The school board that once questioned his very intellect had issued the invitation themselves. "Please return to Northdale to inspire the next generation of thinkers." The district would be honored. He accepted, not for them, but for the students, especially the ones who still sat in the back. Still quiet. Still doubting if they belonged. Inside, the halls buzzed with whispers. Some of the younger teachers didn't recognize him, but students did. Eyes followed him with reverence. Some held out notebooks. Others simply nodded in solidarity, knowing who he was without needing to say it. Room 312 was still there. Same room. Same whiteboard. But the desk where Mr. Callahan once stood was now Jamal's. He didn't erase the past. He replaced it. A mural stretched across the hallway, outside the classroom. Vivid blues, oranges, and metallic golds. It showed a young black boy staring up at a constellation of mathematical equations. Above him, painted in bold white strokes, "Knowledge has no color." Jamal and his summer mentorship students painted it by hand. Each brushstroke was a quiet rebellion. Mr. Callahan, once the face of that room, had vanished after the lawsuit collapsed. His case was dismissed for lack of merit and mounting contradictions. Last anyone heard, he moved to a small town 2 states over, changed his number, and declined every interview request. He didn't leave a legacy. He left a stain. And Jamal had covered it, not with silence, but with something permanent. The first day back, Jamal didn't lecture. He simply pulled a chair to the front of the room, sat eye level with the students, and told his story. Not the viral one, the real one, about cleaning chalkboards at midnight, solving equations on napkins while his dad buffed linoleum floors, about the threats, the fear, the systems built to clip wings before they could spread. He ended with a simple invitation. "This classroom is yours now. You don't need permission to be brilliant here." One student cried. Another asked if he could stay after class for extra help. And Marcus, he stood at the back of the room, broom in hand, not as a janitor, not anymore. He was a guest too. invited by the administration to be honored that day. But even then, old habits lingered. He swept out of instinct, not duty, and he smiled. Not the kind of smile you flash for cameras, but the quiet, satisfied smile of a man who saw his son turn every insult into a stepping stone. As the day wound down, Jamal lingered in the room after students had gone. The sun poured in through the windows, golden and low. He walked to the whiteboard, the same one where it all began. The board that once held a problem meant to humiliate him. Only now, it held something else. Framed behind a sheet of glass, mounted with brass corners, was the exact equation Jamal had solved that day. Not rewritten, not reinterpreted, just as it was. Symbols, scribbles, proof. Below it, a small gold plate read, "Solved by Jamal Reed." A mind unshaken. A moment that changed everything. He stepped closer, fingers brushing the edge of the frame. Footsteps echoed behind him. A voice said softly, "Never thought I'd see this again." Jamal turned. It was Leah. Older, sharper, but still fierce. "Thought you'd be off in space by now," she teased. "Give me a few years," Jamal grinned. "Amati's got me building something big, but I had to come back first." She nodded. "Serious now. This place tried to crush you." He looked at the board, "And now it teaches. Because of me." They stood in silence. Then from the hallway, a younger student peeked in. "Professor Reed?" Jamal turned.
Yeah.
The boy held up a tablet. "Can you help me with this proof? I keep getting stuck at the last step." Jamal smiled. He walked toward the desk, set his bag down, and pulled up a chair. As the student leaned over the tablet, the camera slowly zoomed in on the framed equation, its symbols glowing faintly in the afternoon sun, and just below it, a second plaque being installed by the school custodian. "Legacy begins where the board once ended." If you've ever been silenced, doubted, or told you didn't belong, this story was for you. Because brilliance has no color, and courage doesn't need permission. Type yes if you believe every voice deserves to be heard. Subscribe if this story broke your heart and opened your eyes.